Honey, I blew up the business.
Hey, Scotty. Welcome
Hello,
to
mate.
the podcast. Good to see you. How are you?
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always great to spend some time with you, actually. Not just chatting, we're doing some chatting with a purpose today.
Chatting with purpose is my new thing. But and just for the benefit of everybody listening, Scott and I have known each other for a long time now. I guess over a decade, 12, 13, 14 years. And every time we speak, we have a good chat. So we figured maybe let's record it. And maybe there's some stuff in there we could learn from or could benefit our audience.
We'll edit it to make sure there is anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Get all the good bits condensed. But anyway, if people don't know who Scott is, I've got a big list here of his accomplishments. So, Scott, if you want to go and get a cup of tea, I'll read through your CV. Scott is a bit of a powerhouse out and about in the world. He's he learned his trade at Saatchi & Saatchi, and then he's run marketing for some of the biggest and I would say coolest brands in the world.
Very kind.
People like Levi's, Activision, Diesel. But not only that, he's an entrepreneur multiple times. He's a photographer. He's a DJ. He's a music producer. He's a stand-up comic. He's an author of a very successful book about creativity. He's a global motivational speaker, presenter, podcaster, and bloody hell, executive board member for the British Fashion Council. But the pinnacle of his career, I've got to say, was that he was my wedding photographer.
That was a very notable pinnacle.
Yeah, exactly.
It was great, actually. It was absolutely fantastic to do that.
Yeah, it was a good thing. To be fair, he did a great job, mate. I've got to say that. And actually, it leads into where I wanted to start our chat, actually, because I wanted to go back to the time when we first met, which was probably 2006 or 7, maybe 7. And my company, my agency at the time, was working for Activision, and you were the marketing director there. But what I'm interested in really is the bit where you left Activision to pursue a career as an artist. So can you just tell me a little bit about what led to that and why you ended up there and pursuing this career?
So I ended up at Activision in a very kind of strange way, in that I was headhunted to go there. And I love computer games, absolutely. You know, I was a gamer all my life, and I thought, gaming will be, you know, working in a gaming business. You know, you'll get up in the morning, go to the office, play games, and it'll just be like that. And of course, the reality of those things, it never is. And it actually was a great learning for me, because all the people there actually were really hardcore FMCG marketers. And I wasn't an FMCG marketer. I was kind of a brand person, agency side. And what was great, I learned a whole load of stuff from all the people there. They were absolutely fantastic, taught me a load of things. And there was 2 key decisions that drove my change. And the first one was I was commuting from North London, Stockley Park, every single day, which was an incredible
Where's Stockley Park, for those who don't know London?
So it's North London to Heathrow, on the busiest road at the busiest time.
Right, and how long does that take?
It's a 2-hour commute in the morning and a 2-hour commute in the evening.
Wow.
And it's brutal. It's not just, beep, beep. It's a proper nose to nose all the way. So you sort of spend a lot of your life traveling, literally traveling to commute. And also at the same time, my dad died, and he'd been ill for quite some time. Actually, it was a bit out of the blue. My parents were divorced. I hadn't seen my dad for quite some time. And I got a phone call one day from him, and he broke down in tears and said, "Look, I've got cancer and I'm dying, and I'd like to spend some time together so we can sort of make a bit of an amends on our relationship." We didn't have a great relationship. And so I spent quite a lot of time with my dad in his final sort of 3 months, literally his final 3 months. And one weekend, it was a very telling weekend. I was with him in his house, and we were sat there, and he said to me, he said, he had this kind of really weird London accent. He said, "Son, you look really tired. And I explained to him what I've been doing, and he said, look, when he goes, he's left some money. He said, chill out a bit. And it really stuck with me because, my dad spent all his life, I'd say pretty much, working with a lot of, baggage in his head. I think he was always trying to rebuild a relationship with his dad that he didn't have. And in his voice was always, you're not good enough, son. And he worked and worked, and he made no bones about it. Towards the end of his life, he said the stress of what he'd gone through in his life and the work he put himself under had probably caused his cancer. And he was 59. He wasn't that old at all. And so when he died, I sort of took a look at what was going on. I was like, I enjoy what I do. I am tired. I am working too hard. And I listened to what my dad said. And I made a decision at that moment to say, right, I'm going to quit. I need to step away from the corporate world. And I needed to really spend some time thinking about the kind of creative side of my life. I didn't really feel creatively fulfilled, to be honest, doing what I was doing. And I'd always loved photography. And my dad, funnily enough, had left me sort of 3 cameras, and I decided at that point that I would learn how to use the cameras properly. So I went on a photography course at Central St. Martin's, and a friend of mine, she was also doing photography, and actually we ended up doing a photography course together, and then we travelled to, we went to Morocco to do a kind of a photography tour. I don't know, we just ended up going around all these places, taking loads of photographs, and I really fell in love with it. And I took it the next step. I kind of went, I went traveling around the world, and I, went and shot in India, New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, all sorts of places, really kind of indulging my desire to go and see the world and pick up on all these different cultures and be more creatively refreshed. And also to have a real outlet, because as you said, you mentioned very kindly, I spent a lot of my sort of early years, I don't know, it's 6-7 years producing music, house music, and DJing and traveling, and that was a real creative outlet for me. And I'd kind of lost that, and I stopped doing that. I'd lost the creative outlet, and it's made me realize, in my life, which is what I think about a lot now, is the balance between creativity, having a creative outlet, and everything else you do is just so important. It really, getting that balance right is really meaningful. The minute that I feel that the balance is tipped too far the other way, and I'm not getting enough creative output or outlet, then it causes me sort of, I won't say angst, but there's a real tension that I don't enjoy. And creative outlets, it doesn't have to be photography or music, or quite often it's speaking, public speaking, or it's writing, or it's coming up with, doing stuff like this, or it's coming up with ideas, or it's thinking. But having the capacity and ability and opportunity to do that is just incredibly important.
Yeah, there's a few themes in there that are really relevant actually to today. I was going to bring this up later in the conversation, but really we've had this year or so of lockdown and not commuting, right? Yeah. And not doing things and having perhaps your life turn upside down, having to reinvent yourself somewhat. But I think I can very much relate to this idea of stress and the feeling of needing to prove yourself to an inner voice that perhaps has come down through the generations. I 100% relate to that. But being conscious of that and being able to observe that and see it for what it is I think a really powerful. So I'm so curious. So you then just sort of had this opportunity through the sort of tragedy of your father passing to learn that, and then to have this ability to explore your creativity. So where did that take you then?
Well, it was interesting because when I then came back from traveling, I kind of think, what should I do next? And I didn't really know, actually. I thought I'll set up a photography business. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I got a phone call from a brand that I'd admired for many years, and Diesel. They said, we're looking for someone to come in and head up the marketing team. Would you be interested? And so I met the MD and I met the team there, and immediately the MD said to me, look, we'll set up a studio here for you so you can still do your photography. We want you to continue being creative. They made it very clear that, my role would be as much about bringing my creativity to the business as much as, being part of a great brand. And, when you get opportunities like that, it's very hard to say no. And more actually for the cultural fit, because I just love the idea of the whole diesel philosophy, for successful living was really what was entrenched in the brand, and only the brave and all that sort of stuff. And the people that were there, it was just, Diesel is an incredible brand, and the people who work there are, genuinely incredible. Like, it's such a blend and a mix of different people that you can't help but learn new things, be creative. And that's where it took me. It took me there for 6.5 years. And, I had a great time working with all the partners, traveling around the world, doing all the different things, creating some incredible, award-winning stuff with a brilliant team of people who were just extraordinary. And after doing that again for 6.5 years, you can't, 6.5 years is a long time, or 6.5 years is a long time. And I felt as I was coming to the end of that part of my career, I tipped the balance again. So I was also the commercial director, which was fun, and I learned a lot. So I get to this kind of stage where you do something, you learn a lot, you get exposed to a lot of things, but then it tips your balance away from being creative. And you just lose that. When you start to lose that balance, it's dangerous, I think. So I made a decision. It was a weird decision, actually, because I decided to resign. And people say to me, what on earth? And the story's quite funny, so I can laugh about it now. And my boss at the time, who is a wonderful guy, Johnny, he and I had this deal. He was going to get promoted and I was going to get promoted into the MD role. And one day he called me into the office and said, right, I've got some news for you. And he said, it was about the role. And the news is basically, you're okay, you're going to get more responsibility. You're going to have to move part of your life to Europe, because you're going to be working across Europe. And you're going to get this new title, and it's a pan-European role. I was like, that sounds great. But that was it. There was a whole load of more responsibility. My wife and I just had our first child. But there was nothing, there was no other sense of security. There's no other, pay rise or whatever. Money isn't everything, but of course there's a balance.
Sure.
And I suddenly felt that my life was going to be very imbalanced, excuse me, at a time when I didn't want it to be. And at that point, I made the call that I wasn't going to take the role, and I resigned. Much to people's like, are you mad? We were still coming out. We were still officially kind of coming out of a recession. And it's quite hairy when you come out of something and go, right, I'm going to set I obviously sat with my wife and sat with my family and asked all these questions. And they all literally said, you've got to do your own thing. It's time for you to create your own thing. And that's what I did.
Interesting. There's this balance. You talk about balance a lot there between career and creativity. Perhaps you're kind of, you talk about this idea of finding the sort of creative outlet, and that malaise that creates. So it feels like you sort of got the opportunity perhaps to bring those two things together, the sort of career bit and the creativity bit in your next move. But I'm just don't want to dwell on this before we get into it, because you did this twice. Yeah. You left Activision and became an artist and traveled. And then you left Diesel at the sort of pinnacle of what you, from an outside point of view, looks like the pinnacle of a career in your discipline. And you left. So what were you feeling at that point? And when you were leaving Diesel, and I appreciate you getting encouragement from your family, but what was the emotions you were feeling then?
Terrified. In all cases, I look back now, look back at various points in my career, and I like to think that quite often I left when I was doing well. Because I just think it's very easy. There's one business I left, and when it wasn't a nice leaving, but we can talk about that later, because I think it's an interesting story in it. Definitely one from my learnings. But I think there's something about leaving when you're leaving before you overstay your welcome in any business, I think, is always interesting, because careers can go down very, very quickly. You look at some choices or you look at some decisions, and it only takes one or two bad choices, and the options left open to you are very few and far between. And so, when I was at Diesel, we just won a big award. The team are doing really well. We just hit on, and we've grown the business for the first time. We've grown the business 2 years consecutively. And as much as I felt I could sit there comfortably and carry on doing this, I also felt, no, I couldn't do it. And then that moment when you make that decision, like any big decision that you make in life, you're terrified. It's scary, and you don't have any security, and you suddenly feel the weight of responsibility, And it's quite interesting. A friend of mine said yesterday, he said he's about to be a dad. Should I be nervous? And I sent him a message back to Twitter. I said, no, you shouldn't be nervous. This is one of the moments where you're going to feel the most alive. And not to say that, got 2 kids, but I have a sense that, whenever you give birth or give rebirth to something, whether give birth to a child or give birth to an idea or something, there is that sense of, should I be scared? And people generally feel scared. But at the same time, the really weird thing is it's also a time when I felt most alive, aside from obviously getting married, having kids. Yeah. But I mean, you when you walk out of that office on your final day and you go and smell the air, and you're not Scott from Diesel anymore. You're just you. You don't have anything else to tag onto the end of your name. You're alive, because that's what being human is. It's a real visceral feeling of, I am literally naked.
You got to go and survive.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the human bit, I think, that, and by the way, I really relate to that, because even when I had a big sort of load of trouble the last 3 years, but even in the middle of the load of trouble, I felt alive.
Yeah.
I talked about this with Dan Sullivan on the podcast, and it's like I'm in a knife fight on the street. I've got to really have my wits about me here, because it could really go horribly wrong. But that actual putting to one side the kind of downside to that, you're alive. You got to kind of really have your wits about you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the interesting thing about that is I've spoken to lots of people in business. I work with lots of people in businesses, and quite often, not all of them, but some of them you speak to, or you speak to certain people, and when they're doing the role that they're doing, whatever level they're at, they feel quite the opposite of alive. Everything feels safe. It feels comfortable. Nothing fires them up. They're just, and so it's always that thing, right? It's like, you can take the easy, it's not easy. That's not fair. You can take the road that feels very secure and kind of dull down and dampen down your senses, and have this kind of sense of security. But I think what people have recognized over this last 12 months is that there's something false about that. There is nothing like security. This is the myth that gets, constantly told to people about starting their own business or being an entrepreneur, or, oh God, how do you get your paycheck and how do you make money? And it's like, anybody who's in a business is one paycheck away from losing a whole lot. I saw people in business I worked, 1 minute they come into the office, next minute they're out the door. And they've got to think about mortgage payments or kids or whatever they've got to worry about. So this kind of thinking of everything's secure, and it comes with this cost that you dampen everything around you, because you don't want to believe that you're not secure. And only when that happens does everything, then you're naked. Then you're terrified, but you're alive. You've got to scrap.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, I think this idea of certainty that people exchange for it's safe and certain, but it's not really that. It's not safe. It's not certain. And so you're out on your own. You're ready for a scrap, naked and alone on the street. New Scott. Like, what happened then?
Well, I did a load of wrong things. I made loads of mistakes, which is probably good.
What were they?
Well, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I had a proposition. But this is the funny thing, like they always say, like a joiner's cupboards, they're always broken or whatever, or shoemaker's shoes have got holes in.
Those kids, yeah.
I did the kind of classic mistake of not really thinking about what is the proposition and what is my brand, and I sort of rushed into a couple of things. In the first instance, to generate money. Good thing is I had a couple of projects that were lined up. So I just started working on them, and I just found that really boring. I was just doing exactly what I was doing previously, and I wasn't exercising any creativity. And I called the business accelerator, which was really boring and wasn't me. And I had all this kind of like stuff around me, and I was just like, hang on a minute. And one day I got a phone call from this brilliant organization over in Austria called 15 Seconds. It's just an amazing marketing festival, and they invited me to speak. And so I was like, okay, yeah, great, cool. And they said, yeah, the thing is, we need you to tell us what you're going to speak about, like in the next half an hour, and we need all that information from you. And at that moment, I just thought to myself, this is a sign, because I'm not going to go over and call myself none of the stuff I am happy with about my brand or anything. So I can't put all that down. I've been given 30 minutes to sort it all out. I was like, okay, that's good. That's how I like to work.
Yeah, a bit of a deadline.
And so I decided that I would do something that I was really passionate about, which is about creativity. So I created this speech called How to Be a Creative Mother Effer. And I thought I'd just go for it. And I was doing these things called boom sessions. I just made up this idea, boom sessions. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'll just try that. I call myself the Boom. And so that's how the business was born. It was born out of, a speed of decision making and getting rid of all the baggage of what I was holding back and thinking about, well, actually, what do I need to really do? And what do I really want to do? Right, I'm just going to do it. Let's create the action and let's go. And it was incredible. I shared a taxi with Ryan Holiday, who, of course, created one of the best books I read. I mean, several books, but Stillness is the Key is one of the most brilliant books I read over lockdown. So shared a taxi with him and chatted with him, and all these people that I met at the festival suddenly opened my eyes to, right, you need, get yourself together, put into practice all the things you've learned. And so I created the Boom. I remember to myself, hang on, create the brand, right? It's not about, don't call yourself Scott Morrison marketing. That's just ridiculous. Create a brand, do the proposition, do all the steps that you naturally do as a brand. And that's what I did. And over, 5 or 6 years now, it's taken me this long to get to the simplicity that I like to think. I mean, people tell me it's a very simple proposition now, which is good. But it takes a long time to get to that level of simplicity, right? And people really underestimate that. And I think, what I've found is a lot of people leave business and go, right, I'm going to start my own thing. Lots of marketers, maybe get made redundant or whatever, and go, right, I'm going to start my own thing. They set themselves up to do exactly what they were doing at their old business, everything they hated. They don't clear out any of that. They don't think about, well, what do I really love doing? They don't create the kind of brand. They don't create a value proposition. And within 6 months, they go back into corporate. And then I see them again 3 months later and I say, how are you getting on? Oh, I hate it. I'm back in the grind. And I think that's such a shame because, being an entrepreneur, I don't necessarily call myself an entrepreneur, but having your own business, doing the things that you love doing, being in control of what you want to set out to do, creating the balance that you really want is hard, but it's hard. Nothing. One of the greatest bits of advice to get: the harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. Right? It's like nothing's easy. If it was, everyone would be doing it. So I've learned, the hard work, do it, and do it without, just do it. Just do the hard work. Apply all the thinking that you know about brands if you're a brand person, and if you don't get a brand person involved, because that's what you need to do, and really get to something simple. Like, complexity is the enemy of running a great business. I think just getting things simple helps people buy you, helps people work with you, helps you learn more, helps you think through things better, and I apply those kind of learnings daily.
Yeah, I love that. Complexity is the enemy. That's a great one to stick on the wall. Yeah, I mean, It's. By the way, I love Ryan Holiday too. His book, "The Obstacle Is the Way."
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Oh my,
Well, that's all about it.
That was like a guidebook to the last 12 months for people. If you've not read that, read it. But I should want to just dwell here a little bit because the simplicity, 100%. I'm behind that. I've got a little mantra where I'm trying to simplify everything.
Yeah,
that's it. Because by definition, if it's less to think about, you can do more with it. But I'm curious. So, okay, right. You've had this. So when did you leave Diesel? What year was this?
6-7 years ago now.
Right.
2014. Yeah.
6-7 years. And you where you are today with this real clear simplicity and some, you've kind of earned your spurs and you've got yourself this thing down. But I'm curious about the kind of bumpy road to get you from there to here. Now, what was the sort of bits in there you think were the real learning moments that have helped you get to that level of clarity?
I think a lot of it is you've really got to experiment and feel the fear of experimentation. And I didn't at first because I wanted everything to be so right and so perfect. Mm. And I ended up fixating too much on certain things. And one of the best bits of advice I can give myself, which I'll share with everyone, I kind of made the quote up thinking about it. But it's this idea of listening too much to some people and not enough to others. And I listened too much to certain people about what it should be, and you've got to work 24 hours a day and blah, all that sort of stuff that you get told when you're an entrepreneur, and you've got to follow that kind of route and blah, blah. And I didn't listen to enough to other people. So I didn't take other people's advice. Sometimes because I just felt that I was like, no, that can't be right about me. Sometimes it was about me, it was about, here's a skill you've got, or have you thought about trying that? No, not really. And other times I sort of slightly arrogantly at the start of doing it all, I was like, yeah, but I was running £100 million businesses. And what you've got to remember, I think, is that thing I mentioned earlier. When you are naked, reborn, you are you. You are not Scott from Diesel, opening doors is not. You don't have a brand name behind you or anything to open doors, and you've really got to relearn all of those different approaches, and in the best possible way. I'm graced to have such a lovely network, people I've worked with over the years and everything else. But just because you have that does not mean that you automatically have a business. Just because know lots of people, nobody's going to say, yeah, come and work with me. And I made a bit of that assumption a couple of times. I know people who do make that assumption, and I've learned, you learn the hard way when it's your own business. What is the value you create? How do you articulate that value? How do you show that value? And even when I knew that, I then started creating loads of products. I started spilling out. I was like, I've got all these amazing products. And the interesting thing is, what I've learned, between then and now is, I know it's an old cliche, but less really is more. Like, nobody's going to buy 1,000 things from you. Because when you open up yourself to, I've got 100 things, well, so's that person. You make the comparison so broad that people start shopping around. Mm. It's about getting yourself uncomfortably into one little bit, one area. Mm. And it feels counterintuitive because, I was like, but I want to be a specialist in this, this, and this. I want to do all this. And it's like, well, yeah, but the reality is you might be able to do something, but you won't be able to do it very well. Be able to do it goodish, and so every little thing you think about, language, product, how you go to market, what you talk about, again, it's hard, and never underestimate the level of work it takes. I think I probably underestimated at some stages how hard it really is. And the other thing is never not ask for help. There's that wonderful book which I read that you recommended, Dan, Who Not How.
Oh yeah, great.
Which, of course, is Dan Sullivan's thinking with Dr. Benjamin Hardy's writing. But that is an absolute, I spent a lot of time thinking, how do I do that? And sometimes I still fall into that trap. And it was when I read that book, I realized just how much of the heavy lifting you can meaningfully give to other people to help you further your ambition and what you in a nice way. You pay them for it or whatever. You do contra deals or whatever. But the more you can do that, the easier it becomes to kind of run your business.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I just want to just touch on a couple of points you brought up, which I think is, again, it's really great. But this idea of ego getting in the way, this idea of, I guess, naivety, like you're not quite sure what's going to happen, which I'm very guilty of, and this idea of almost looking outside of yourself to get help through like thinking about who, not how. But I mean, you get intimated here that you were just throwing yourself at it, like you're doing 1,000 things at 1,000 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. But what was the impact on you of that?
Oh, well, I mean, I think round about. So the other thing that I did at the same time, incidentally, was I co-founded another startup, and that was driven by this inner voice. Right, it was like, right, you're going to do the boom. Hang on, though, right? Even though you love doing this thing, and you're starting to get traction, and it's on its way up, you're going to do something else because you've got to prove yourself to the world. So you're going to create a startup. This is my inner voice. You're going to create a startup. You're going to co-found it. You're going to build it all from scratch with your co-founder, who's a brilliant guy. And even if it burns you out and tears you to the ground and you lose lots of money, you're going to do it, because that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. And I did that in 2016. So I parked the boom, and just as I got traction, just as I was doing lots of interesting stuff, and I co-founded a business with my business partner called ThinkSprint, which is a great concept. We got some great clients on board, but it really took its toll. It ended up with me getting back into that rut of not being creative, because it's kind of creating a tech startup is not my bag. But I had to do it to find that out, and it took such a toll. I mean, financially, it took a heavy toll, and personally, it took a heavy toll. And I, in fact, in 2017, I think, stepped back from the day-to-day running of it. And my business, it was obvious that, I wasn't creating, we were creating value, but for where the business needed to get to, I wasn't the person to move that up, and we needed a tech head. So we made that happen. And now actually, the business it's completely transformed. It's called Loops now, and it's run by Sam and Nigel. We've got some great clients on board and looking to scale that out. But that's because I stepped out of that because I realized again I'd fall into the trap, listening to that thing of listening too much to some, my inner voice, and not enough to others. My other inner voice saying, no, the boom is the thing. And once I stepped out of doing that, again, it was terrifying. But I had to go back to what, I've had this kind of inner calling. It's a weird thing. I know people talk about the vocation, like inner calling. People were saying to me, Scott, where's the boom? We need the boom. People were actually saying that to me and calling me, Scott, the boom, where are you? Friends from 15 Seconds were saying, we need you to come back and speak and come bring the boom and all this. And I was like, I wasn't listening to any of that. I was going, no, I'm going to be a startup king and blah, blah. and that tension, I think lots of people go through that tension about, well, what do I really want to do versus what should I do? And I think you've got to listen to what's going on inside. And I think one of the greatest learnings I've had about all of this is the way to ease that tension. There's a wonderful book. He's written it's a guy called Michael Singer, like Living from a Place of Surrender and the Untethered Soul. And this idea of the universe is it's perfect. Every interaction of it is perfect. A ladybird landing on your finger has taken billions of years to happen. So don't try and control what's going on. And I was trying to, I was listening to my voice going, right, I'm going to control this and I'm going to get this. And it's like, no, you just got to surrender. You've just got to step back and go, what in my deepest visceral being that the universe has put there, because I'm a mixture of chemicals and whatnot that have come from planets and stars, what is that deep visceral thing that I'm supposed to be doing? And I've spent a lot of my life fighting it. And when you fight it, you get that tension and tension. You know, I've had depression, I've had mental health issues, I've had all sorts. And I look back and it's at those moments when I've really, when that tension has been at its greatest, has my mental health been at its lowest, at its worst. And surrendering, and it sounds like everyone goes, oh yeah, it's a bit woo-woo, that, isn't it? It's like, no, it's not. It's like recognizing that there's a million things happening. If you look out the window now, something will be happening. A million things will be happening. And you'll just observe something of it. If you look out the window in 10 minutes' time, you hadn't looked out. Still, things are still happening. They're not happening for you. They're happening despite you. So all this stuff is happening in the world. And, I just believe in, like, if you just say, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm about, you put it out there and you let the world take its course. And I'm not saying go with the flow. That's a different thing. I'm saying be respectful and appreciate the fact that actually we put too much emphasis on trying to control stuff that we really can't control. And when you allow that you kind of come to this place of surrender, your life and your creativity, your output, what you're trying to achieve becomes, again, like I say, simpler, because you don't want to add the layer of complexity. You don't want to add this layer of false security like we do. Just simply allow, as generation 2 below me would say, allow and see the difference it makes. Just literally try it. For those listening, try and work out what you can't control and just let it go.
Yeah, it's very wise. I mean, really, because I've suffered with this, trying to peg everything down to the way I want it to be, the way I feel it should be, and then getting anxious about the fact it's not that. Yeah, and I think that's really the fact you've got to that place shows a sort of, you got over your own ego, the thing telling you what you should be because that's what everybody else is doing, right?
Yes.
Start to play your own game, not everybody else is doing.
Then that's hard, Dan, by the way. I don't underestimate how hard that is and how much work it takes, because I spent quite a long time, I've had therapy and all sorts of different things, and I like to think that I'm more self-aware certainly than I was, say, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. But even still, even after having all that stuff and talking about things lots and going through lots of different things, the ego is a voracious not enemy. I mean, I know it comes from the place it's trying to help you, it's trying to protect you. But again, when you think about false security, the ego is false security in many ways. The things it's trying to protect you from are the things that you have no fear of, really. It's not real.
Yeah. So I think what you've shared is the price of learning that has been mental health issues, depression, fear, loss, lack. And by the way, I know that because I've done that. That's exactly the process I've been through. It's taken me a long time to learn these lessons. I mean, and it's a constant practice. Actually, I would say it's a practice every day. So there's a quote on your site which I think is really appropriate. I'm going to raise it now. That I think it's really interesting to see, based on everything you've just said, how you see how our listeners can apply this to themselves now. So on your site, it says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those that cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, we've just gone through this lockdown. There's a lot of uncertainty out there for everyone, and particularly for our audience as business owners, entrepreneurs. How can they apply that to their lives and building on what you said about surrender?
So that quote's from Alvin Toffler, who was a futurist. It's credited to him. Some people say he didn't actually say it, but anyway, regardless, it's a very powerful quote. And I think I did some research on this actually, and I can't remember the numbers, so don't hold me to it. But I think the illiteracy rates at the start of the 20th century, like the literal reading and writing rates, there was something like I'm not making this up. I did it, but it's something like 90% or something. There was a huge number of people who were illiterate, literally, who couldn't read and write at the start of the 20th century across the world. And I was thinking, well, if you applied that same number to those people in the world who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. So if you apply it to Alvin Toffler's thinking, this applies to a huge number of people. You know, even if we had 75% of the world's population are unable to do it, that's a lot. And we know what the impact of illiteracy in reading and writing is on people. And of course, over time, that's come down to a much lower level, still, you know, high. But that impacts economic upturn. It helps people's lives better, all that sort of stuff. Now, if we apply that to Alvin Toffler's thinking, what Alvin Toffler is referring to here is this level of self-awareness that allows us to shed thinking or things that aren't fit for purpose. And our innate sort of human ability and desire is for knowledge. We obviously have a thirst for knowledge. And we end up hoarding knowledge quite often. I mean, some of it falls out of our heads anyway. But we tend to hoard knowledge and then hoard practices and tools and behaviors and everything that we constantly use. And that's learning, right? We learn all this stuff. The interesting thing is, of course, over time, some of that stuff becomes unfit for purpose. You know, if somebody said to me, "Oh, Scott, you know, you need to learn how to ride a penny farthing tomorrow," that's kind of like, that's not learning that I need to pick up. And I'm exaggerating to make the point, but there's lots of things like the way that you manage people, the way that you interact with people, the way that you speak, the way that you write, the way that you conduct meetings, whatever it might be in this world is not fit for purpose. And of course, when the world changes at the pace that it has over the last 12 months, that learning needs to be interrogated even more because the world is a very different place. And so businesses, I did a sort of a speaking tour, as it were, a virtual speaking tour in the summer to late summer last year. And my message, which still remains the same today, is there is no new normal. And this kind of people talking about the new normal. There is no new normal. There is only the future you create was my mantra. And it still is. And my encouragement to leaders and entrepreneurs and businesses and the work that I'm doing at the moment is all about how do you create the future that you want to see? And the first part of that always is thinking about what do we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn? What do we know about how we act and behave and work and collaborate and all that sort of thing? What do we need to unlearn? What do we need to stop doing, in other words? What if that is not fit for purpose in the way that we want to think about the future? And when we say what do we need to relearn is a mix of what do we want to start doing to change our way of being. But when you think about relearning, we might have some huge gaps. You know, we're talking here about a future that we don't necessarily know or understand. So we're going to have gaps in our knowledge, and we're going to have to take some kind of calculated decisions on what that looks like. But, you know, I'm thinking people are relearning at the moment hybrid working, for example. They're relearning what the office space means. They're relearning, like we talked about at the beginning, I think they're relearning human connection. Because human connection now is not the same as human connection, 18 months ago, because your typical human connection involved your immediate family or your next level of family. We don't even have that. And then we're expected to go back into an office or back onto the tube, completely disconnected from our most connected part. And then we're supposed to reconnect with the society, you know. So all these things, you know, and so from an entrepreneur point of view, you think about your business from a personal perspective. You know, I like to think, again, what can you unlearn and relearn? And if in your relearning, you can start thinking about how do I let go of some of this stuff? You know, one of the things I looked at over the pandemic and the lockdown was certainly when I looked at my business and my own personal thing, it was this whole idea, what was I trying to control and why? And you look at something and you go, God, that's just pointless, right? And once you can start to let some of that stuff go and relearn, how do you surrender control of those kind of things? How do you just let it go? It is, and I am, you know, my wife will attest, I am properly OCD. It's kind of one of my things. And of course, when you're in this, you know, I would come home from being out all day and I'd be like, why is that there? Move that. Why? You know, I'd spend an hour going, and it would really give me anxiety. You know, why is there a towel on the floor? Why are the kids' shoes not, you know? And I've learned, I've had to let all that go because we've been 24 hours a day, you know, if you saw our kitchen table sometimes with paint all over and everything else, for me, that would have given me the fear. But I just had to let it go. And they're only small things. And I know, and people say, well, come on, get a grip. But it's all relative, right?
Yeah, it's
whatever you need to do.
Well, I'm bad at that, by the way. And my wife and I literally yesterday had a big ding dong about the pantry, and everything was piled out. Anyway, I was having a freak out. But it's weird, like you're kind of, we're all irrational creatures, right? And I think this is part of what's interesting about what you're saying is observing that in you when it starts to rise. Yeah. And observing the feeling, the emotion, and going, hey, I can choose not to get into that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really powerful, because we're all like being bombarded as leaders in businesses with information that's scary or change that's happening really rapidly, and then stuff we've got to, I think, totally agree with you. You've got to ditch a lot of old knowledge and relearn a lot of new knowledge, and that's creates again a feeling of that kind of uncertainty that you're into. But I think there's a line here. I'm just going to put this out and print it and put it next to my desk. But there's no new normal, only the future you create. That is beautiful, Scott, really. And I think that's the fact you've got that kind of, to as an entrepreneur, a business owner, you can actually live that out. You have the opportunity to do that. I think it's incredibly inspiring.
Well, I mean, everything that I've always done in my career, this is one of the two things that I've learned over listening to people properly. Is a very dear friend of mine who's been a real kind of pillar of advice over the years said to me one day when we were talking, he said, you know what you are? I was like, oh, what do you want to call me? And Gabby said to me, he's called Gabby Kahane. Gabby said to me, you're a synthesizer. He said, you're the sort of person who can listen to all this information and take it all and condense everything down into something really, really simple and straightforward. And I've always taken that on board. And for me, it's always about how can you be different? In the marketplace, every market that you're in, every business that it's very easy to kind of toe the line and be the same and play out the role that people want you to play. But I've always thought of myself as somebody slightly different, a bit mischievous, for all the right reasons. I talk about a lot of the tools. I talk about things like heresy questions, asking the questions that nobody dares ask but really needs to, all that sort of stuff. And my provocation, the whole point of this was, this idea of being different and playing to a strength and identifying it is, it helps you position yourself as a business and a brand. But secondly, it really provokes in the world that you want to be in. I want to be seen as a kind of a provocateur. I just kept hearing everyone talk about this new normal, and all it engendered for me was people sitting at home going, I can't, be fine in 3 months, this, don't worry, it's just a flu, it'll all be gone. And then stepping out, blinking into the sun, and the whole business eradicated, or, whatever they've got just crumbling around them, because they were sat in a 12-month void, and everyone else was thinking about stuff and they weren't. So that's why I was saying to people in business, create the future you want to see. Like, there's never been a bigger experiment than the one we've just had over the last 12 months. Never in the whole of the world. The whole world in one place doing the same thing for 12 months will never happen again, probably.
100%. And I think in all that chaos, so it feels like chaos when it's happening, is amazing opportunities if you can kind of get over that that kind of fear and uncertainty thing. This is real. So if you want to find out more about Scott's thinking, which I recommend you do, because it's, as you can tell, brilliant. I recommend you connect with him on social media. Go and check him out. Where can we find you, Scott? Where can we connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. So yeah, please link in with me. I'm also on Instagram, obviously. I'm on Twitter, but I don't really use Twitter that much, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And of course, they can go. The thing I was just talking to you about there is actually a free masterclass. I've got a free masterclass on there's no new normal, only the future you create, on my website, and people can download a masterclass on how they can do that for themselves.
Perfect. So go to www.unleashtheboom.com. That's Unleash
right.
The Boom. And Scott's at Scott the Boom on social, I believe, on all.
That's correct.
All social handles. So listen, really do connect with him because he's got great gear and he's a great guy. And I always love speaking to you. And just before we wrap up, I like to ask people this question because you've been full of golden advice. But there is a lot of advice out there for people. What should people ignore? Just in the last 60 seconds before we wrap it up, what should people ignore?
They should not listen to the standard, normal, off-the-shelf advice that they see on social media, and they should not look at Instagram and all those things as some kind of massive mood board on how they should be. Really don't. I can't tell people enough. It's all about create the future you want to see. Work out what works for you. And my last kind of quote that I've been using, I kind of made this one up as well, but I've been using it a lot with my businesses that I've been working with is, as humans, we're geared to finding answers to everything. So stop creating solutions that bind, because we can just create solutions all day long. Ask questions that free your mind. So ask yourself questions. Stop sitting there going, right, I'm going to do this. Start asking the questions that free your mind and surrender, and then the solutions will present themselves. Don't put the pressure on yourself to keep coming up with solutions because they will not be fit for purpose and they'll be rooted in what you know rather than expanding your mind and thinking about what you don't know and what you could explore.
Love it. Well, again, another example of your great brain in action. Scott, you're a total geezer and I love you.
Thanks,
and thank you so much.
I love you too, mate. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, really, and thank you for sharing so openly. And I'm just going to click. So everyone, check you out. I'm going to click stop recording. Let's have a quick chat afterwards. And really good to see you. Thanks for sharing.
And I'd love to speak to any of your listeners if they want to hear anything. That's great.
Connect with Scott, everyone. Speak to you next. Cheers.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye-bye. If you want to receive the top 5 tidbits, the nuggets, the insights from each episode in your inbox every week, head up to honeyblueupthebusiness.com. Yes, the snappily titled honeyblueupthebusiness.com, and enter your email address. And we're going to get the best bits. We're going to collate them together and we're going to send them to you. So you don't have to write them down when listening to the podcast. Yes, nice and easy. So get up there, enter your email address, get the tips, all good. And I've got to say before I go that this podcast is generously supported by my company, The Tech Department. Thank you, guys. They are indulging me as I'm pursuing this little creative project. If you want to find a company that helps make your technology better so that gets your business better as well, head up to thetechdept.com. So on behalf of everybody here, thanks for listening. See you next time.